I checked the oxygen levels on the Poseidon 9's readouts. At 6 hours at current usage with a 2-hour emergency reserve. More than enough for the mission. The numbers glowed green against the dim control panel. Pre-dive checklist complete, I said, mostly to myself, as my fingers moved across the touchscreen to initialize the descent sequence. As the submersible began its slow sink into the darkness below, I mentally reviewed what Zoe had hammered into me during yesterday's briefing. Find evidence of Terraform's illegal mining operation in the protected zone of the Mariana Trench. Document everything thoroughly. Avoid direct engagement with any Terraform personnel or equipment. Simple in theory. The memory of Zoe standing in her office 2 days ago was still fresh. She'd called me in personally, her hazel eyes intense as she laid out exactly why this mission mattered to OceanGuard Industries. "This isn't just about corporate competition, Michael," she'd said, her British accent more pronounced than usual, a tell that she was deadly serious. "If Terraform is mining in protected waters, they're violating international law and causing irreparable damage to one of Earth's most pristine ecosystems. We need incontrovertible evidence." The water outside the viewports changed from bright blue to deep navy as I descended. The Poseidon was the most advanced deep-sea exploration vehicle in OceanGuard's fleet, compact but full of technology. My pilot's chair faced a semicircular array of screens and controls with reinforced viewports on 3 sides for direct observation. Passing 1,000 meters, James's voice came through the radio, crisp and professional. "All systems look good from up here. How's our favorite deep diver doing?" "Feeling right at home," I replied, adjusting the ballast to ensure a smooth, controlled descent. "How's the weather up there?" "Captain Marcado says we're expecting clear conditions for the next 24 hours. The Vigilant is holding position at the coordinates. We'll be right overhead the entire time." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. Jessica ran a tight ship, which was exactly what you wanted when diving to one of the deepest parts of the ocean. Knowing the support vessel was in good hands let me focus on what lay ahead. 3,000 meters, James updated after several minutes of silence. "Sonar is clear. No other vessels detected in the area." The light from the surface had vanished. Outside was complete darkness. I switched on the Poseidon's external lights, creating a small circle around the submersible. Strange deep-sea creatures drifted through the beam. Translucent beings that seemed otherworldly. 5,000 me. James's voice now carried a slight static. "Still receiving your telemetry clearly." The descent continued in relative silence. I monitored the hull integrity, external pressure readings, and oxygen consumption, making minor adjustments to maintain the optimal descent rate. The deeper I went, the more the submersible creaked and groaned as the tremendous pressure of the ocean pressed in from all sides. "Passing 9,000 meters, I reported, noticing the increasing interference on the comm line. "Radio quality degrading as expected." "Copy that." James's voice broke up between bursts of static. "Maintain 1 5-minute check-ins. Possible." I adjusted the radio settings, boosting the signal strength, but the physics of deep-sea communication were unforgiving. Radio waves simply didn't propagate well through miles of seawater. "I'll maintain contact as long as possible," I said, unsure how much he could hear. "Approaching target depth soon." The lights pierced the darkness. I increased their intensity, illuminating the trench wall. Massive rock formations jutted out at odd angles, covered in strange bacterial mats that had evolved to survive in one of Earth's most extreme environments. After several more minutes of descent, James's voice broke through once more, heavily distorted but understandable. "Michael, final check. Remember, documentation only. Do not engage any personnel or equipment." "Copy that," I replied. "Documentation only. I'll maintain standard operating procedures." "Good luck. Next check-in 15 minutes." The radio fell silent, and I knew that soon I'd lose contact completely. From here on, I'd be entirely alone, miles beneath the surface with only the Poseidon's systems between me and the crushing pressure outside. I guided the submersible toward the coordinates where our satellite thermal imaging had detected heat signatures that shouldn't exist at these depths. If Terraform was running mining equipment down here, we'd find the evidence. I swept the area in a grid pattern, recording everything with the Poseidon's external cameras. 2 hours passed with nothing to report, then 3. I started to doubt our intelligence when I felt a faint vibration running through the submersible's frame. I thought it might be a minor equipment malfunction, but the diagnostic showed all systems working fine. The vibration continued, steady and mechanical, definitely not natural. I killed the external lights and checked the passive sonar. There was something out there generating both sound and vibration. I triangulated the source and carefully guided the Poseidon in that direction, running with minimal power to reduce my own signature. The vibrations intensified as I got closer, shaking the water in the submersible hull. I steered around a large rock formation that rose from the trench wall, moving carefully to avoid being seen. As I cleared the formation, I restored power to the external lights. And there it was, something enormous filling the viewports, stretching beyond my lights in both directions. I sat frozen in my seat, staring at the impossible scale before me. I froze in disbelief as the massive structure came into full view. The terraform colossus filled my viewports, an industrial monstrosity that had no business being here, 9,000 meters below the surface in internationally protected waters. The illegal trencher extended like a horizontal skyscraper across the ocean floor, its massive cutting arrays carving through ancient sediment with mechanical indifference. My God, I whispered to myself, the words disappearing into the quiet hum of the Poseidon's life support systems. I tapped the control panel, activating all recording systems. The main camera whirred to life along with 3 backup recorders. This was what Ocean Guard had sent me to find. I adjusted the external lights to capture the destruction. The trencher had carved a deep gash in the seabed that stretched beyond what my lights could reach, disappearing into the trench. I reached for the communication system, pressing the transmit button firmly. James, are you receiving? I found it. Terraform's operating an industrial trencher down here. It's enormous. The speaker returned nothing but static. I tried again, adjusting frequencies, but got the same result. I was too deep now, the water and rock above, creating an impenetrable barrier for our communication signals. I was on my own. I checked the submersible systems. Everything looked stable, though oxygen consumption had increased slightly, likely due to my elevated heart rate. I still had plenty of air, but I needed to be efficient with my time down here. The trencher hadn't detected me yet. I carefully maneuvered the Poseidon closer, keeping to the shadows cast by the trench wall. The machine's powerful floodlights swept across the seabed, illuminating its own destructive path, but creating deep shadows where I could move unnoticed. As I crept along the perimeter of its operation, the trencher's lights revealed something that made my stomach drop. Beyond the machine, scattered across the trench floor, lay hundreds of enormous bones, an underwater graveyard of whale skeletons. Some appeared ancient, covered in sediment and sea growth, while others looked relatively recent. What the hell? I murmured, angling the Poseidon to get a better view. These were not ordinary whale remains. Many were larger than modern specimens, with skull cavities big enough for a small car. I guided the submersible through the collection, ensuring the cameras captured everything. This was not just an illegal mining operation. They had disturbed what seemed to be a natural whale fall site. Some of these bones looked like they had been here for centuries. I watched the trencher while I documented the scene, staying out of its sensor range. This site held immense scientific value, and Terraform was destroying evidence of what could be an ancient feeding or dying ground. The temperature gauge showed near freezing water. Yet, I felt sweat on my forehead as I worked. What I was seeing would shake the scientific community and the international courts. This footage alone would cost Terraform billions. I navigated around what looked like a spinal column, the length of a bus. Recording from multiple angles, the bone was yellowed with age, but remarkably preserved in the cold, high-pressure environment. Moving on, I approached what had to be the largest skull I'd ever seen, maybe 20 feet across, with a jaw that could have swallowed the Poseidon whole. As I rounded this massive skull, something moved at the edge of my vision, something big. I jerked my head toward the movement, but saw only darkness beyond my lights. Just debris, I told myself, but my pulse quickened all the same. I checked the sonar display, trying to get a read on whatever I'd seen, but the screen showed only distorted feedback. The trencher's constant vibrations were interfering with the acoustic signals, creating a mess of false returns and shadows. I tapped the controls, switching to thermal imaging mode. The screen flickered, then stabilized, displaying the cold blues and purples of the deep-sea environment. The trencher showed as a bright orange-red mass in the distance, its heat signature unmistakable against the cold background. But there was something else. Near the edge of the thermal display, a large heat signature moved slowly across the screen, unlike anything I'd seen in my years of deep-sea exploration. It was too big to be a fish and too hot for geological activity, moving purposefully around the whale graveyard as if patrolling. Its temperature was several degrees warmer than the surrounding water, a biological impossibility at these depths, where creatures should match the near-freezing temperature. I adjusted the sensors, convinced I was seeing a malfunction. The calibration check came back normal. Whatever this was, the Poseidon's instruments were reading it correctly. This can't be right, I said to myself, voice tight in the confined space of the cockpit. The heat signature disappeared from the edge of my screen, then reappeared closer, moving with unsettling speed for something so large. I estimated it at well over 60 feet in length based on the thermal readout, longer than the Poseidon by at least 4 times. My scientific mind raced through possibilities. A submarine volcanic vent? No, it was moving independently of the currents. Another submersible? Impossible at this depth without lights or a detectable engine signature. Some unknown species of giant squid or whale? Nothing that large could survive the crushing pressure, 9,000 meters down. The signature moved in a wide circle around me. I realized how vulnerable the Poseidon was, a small bubble of air and technology in a dangerous environment. I checked the recording systems again, confirming they were capturing the thermal feed. Whatever this anomaly was, I needed proof. The research value alone was enormous. Regardless of the legal case against Terraform, the strange heat pattern completed a full circle around my position, then paused, hovering at the edge of my sensor range. I held my breath, watching as it remained stationary for nearly a minute before beginning to move again, this time directly toward the Poseidon. My hand hovered over the thruster controls, ready to retreat if necessary. The signature accelerated, its temperature reading increasing slightly as it moved. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the heat signature veered away, retreating into the darkness beyond the range of my sensors. I exhaled slowly, realizing I'd been holding my breath. My heart pounded against my ribs as I scanned the displays, searching for any sign of the anomaly's return. The trencher worked steadily in the distance, ignoring me and everything else in these depths. Its grinding blades tore through sediment that had been undisturbed for ages, destroying the natural environment and the scientific treasure of the whale graveyard. I focused the Poseidon's cameras back on the documentation task, while keeping the thermal imaging active on a secondary display. The strange heat signature didn't show up again, but I felt like something ancient was watching me. I recorded the whale remains and the trencher's operation from different angles. The evidence was clear. Terraform was operating illegally in protected waters, destroying a site of scientific importance. This would give Zoe and the legal team enough to shut down Terraform's operations for good. But my thoughts kept returning to that heat signature. Nothing that large should exist at these depths, and nothing should maintain a temperature so much higher than the surrounding water without a huge energy source. As I completed my survey of the whale graveyard, I turned the Poseidon back toward the thermal anomaly's last known position. Scientific curiosity overrode caution. I needed to know what was out there. I switched the external lights to their maximum setting, illuminating a wider swath of the trench floor. The beams cut through the murky water, revealing more scattered bones and the eerie topography of the ocean floor, but nothing that could explain the heat signature. I checked the thermal display again, adjusting the sensitivity to capture even the slightest temperature variations. The screen remained unchanged, showing only the cold blue of the deep sea and the distant heat bloom of the trencher. Whatever I had detected was gone or hiding. I glanced at the oxygen levels, still sufficient, but I'd been down longer than planned. With the evidence secured and no sign of the mysterious heat source, the rational choice was to begin my ascent. Yet I hesitated, scanning the darkness beyond my lights one more time. The thermal display suddenly flickered. The heat signature had returned, larger and more defined than before. It moved with purpose now, no longer circling, but approaching directly, its temperature reading even higher than earlier measurements. I adjusted the external cameras to track the massive heat signature as it drew nearer to the Poseidon. Whatever this thing was, it was coming to investigate me. I adjusted the external cameras to track the massive heat signature, fingers moving quickly across the control panel. The thermal display showed the object circling the Poseidon, its movement purposeful and fluid. "Come on, show yourself," I muttered, swiveling the camera array to maintain visual contact. A shape at least 20 meters long glided around my submersible, just at the edge of visibility. I could make out only a vague outline in the murky water until it ventured closer. I immediately cranked the external lights to maximum brightness, illuminating the water around me. The breath caught in my throat as the creature came into full view. It was a shark, but not just any shark. This was something that shouldn't exist. Its body was massive, at least 3 times larger than any great white I'd ever seen. The broad triangular teeth visible in its slightly open mouth were unmistakable. I'd seen those same teeth behind glass cases in museums. Carcharocles megalodon, a living fossil, a species that was supposed to have gone extinct more than 2 million years ago. "That's impossible," I whispered. Even as I watched the prehistoric monster complete another circuit around the Poseidon, the shark's movements became more erratic with each pass. Its powerful tail swept faster through the water, and it changed direction more frequently. The creature seemed agitated by my presence, or perhaps by the lights I was using to track it. I watched it swim another loop, its size becoming more apparent as it passed directly in front of the viewport. 20 meters of prehistoric apex predator, perfectly adapted for hunting and killing. Its skin was a mottled gray-blue that blended with the deep water environment, and its eyes, cold, black, and ancient, seemed to stare directly at me. A sudden realization hit me as I glanced toward the distant trencher, still grinding away at the seabed. The vibrations from that machine, they were acting like a dinner bell. The massive industrial equipment was disturbing the trench floor, probably stirring up all kinds of marine life. Easy prey for a predator of this size. And now, I was here too, an unexpected intruder in its feeding ground. I reached for the radio, desperate to make contact with someone on the surface. "James, do you copy?" "James, this is Michael." I adjusted the frequency, hoping to cut through the interference. "Captain Jessica, anyone from Vigilant? I need immediate assistance." Nothing but static answered me. I was too deep with too much water and rock between me and the ship. I was completely alone with this ancient monster. Without warning, the megalodon turned sharply. Its body tensed visibly, the massive tail going rigid for just a moment. Then it charged straight at the submersible, moving with shocking speed for something so large. My training kicked in. I slammed my hand on the thruster controls, firing a quick burst to the right. The Poseidon lurched sideways, as the prehistoric jaws snapped shut less than a meter from the hull, right where I had been seconds before. But I wasn't quick enough to avoid it completely. The massive body slammed against the side of the submersible, the impact throwing me against my harness. The Poseidon spun violently through the water, instruments and small items flying around the cabin. A coffee mug shattered against the wall. My tablet slid across the floor. Red warning lights flashed across the control panel. A computerized voice cut through the chaos. "Warning. Structural integrity compromised. Hull integrity at 82%. I fought with the controls, trying to stabilize the spinning vessel. My hands flew across the panel, adjusting ballast and firing short, controlled bursts from the thrusters. Gradually, the spinning slowed, and I managed to level the Poseidon. The damage report scrolled across my screen. Nothing critical had failed yet, but the hull had taken a significant hit. Another impact like that could breach the pressure hull, and at this depth, that would be instantly fatal. I needed to retreat. To get back to the surface, I pushed the throttle forward, aiming the submersible upward toward where the Vigilant waited, 9,000 meters above me. The thermal display showed the megalodon circling back around. It moved with purpose, cutting through the water to position itself between me and my ascent path. As I watched, it rose slightly, effectively blocking my route to the surface. I tried to maneuver around it, but the creature matched my movements, forcing me to dive deeper to avoid another collision. Each time I attempted to find a path upward, the megalodon intercepted me, driving me further into the darkness of the trench. A cold realization settled in my gut as I watched the depth gauge tick upward. 9,200 meters. 9,300 meters. This wasn't random aggression. The megalodon wasn't simply reacting to my presence or the lights. Its movements were too coordinated, too intelligent. It was herding me deeper into the trench, away from escape, cutting off every attempt I made to reach safety. I was being hunted. I had been playing this nightmare game of cat and mouse with the megalodon for 40 minutes. Every time I tried to find an opening to escape, it anticipated my moves and cut me off. Each encounter left the Poseidon more damaged than before, the hull groaning in protest with every evasive maneuver. The shark's attack pattern had become frighteningly predictable. It would circle wide, disappear from my limited field of vision, then charge without warning from the darkness. I'd managed to dodge the worst of the attacks so far, but my luck was running thin. I wiped sweat from my forehead and tried to focus on the thermal display. The massive heat signature had vanished again, which meant only one thing. It was circling for another attack. My hands hovered over the controls, ready to jerk the submersible in any direction. The impact, when it came, was worse than before. The megalodon slammed into the rear section of the Poseidon with such force that I was thrown forward against my harness. The control panel erupted with warning lights as the cabin filled with the sound of screaming metal. "No! No! No!" I yelled, frantically trying to engage the rear thrusters to put some distance between us. The controls responded with nothing but error messages. The computer's voice cut through my panic. "Warning, rear thruster system offline. Forward propulsion only." I cursed under my breath. Without the rear thrusters, my ability to maneuver had just been cut in half. I was limited to forward movement, and whatever I could accomplish with the ballast system, not nearly enough to outmaneuver a prehistoric apex predator in its home territory. The thermal display showed the megalodon circling back around, moving with purposeful aggression. I diverted all remaining power to the forward thrusters and pushed ahead. My only option now, to try to outrun it in a straight line. A new alert flashed across my screen. External damage detected. Hydraulic system compromised. I pulled up the external camera feed and saw a cloud of dark fluid trailing behind the Poseidon. Hydraulic fluid leaking from a ruptured housing. The sight made my stomach drop. Not only was I losing another critical system, but I was also leaving a blood trail for the predator to follow. Sure enough, the thermal signature on my display suddenly accelerated. The megalodon shot through the cloud of hydraulic fluid, its massive body contorting with what I could only interpret as increased agitation. The creature followed the trail directly to me, its heat signature growing larger on my display. I braced for impact, gripping the control panel with white knuckles. The collision felt like hitting a concrete wall. The Poseidon spun violently, and I heard something snap inside the hull. The computer's voice sounded again. "Warning, structural integrity at 64%. Critical damage sustained." My mind raced as I tried to stabilize the submersible. 64%. The Poseidon was designed to withstand incredible pressure, but every ship had its breaking point. If the integrity dropped below 40%, a catastrophic hull breach was all but guaranteed. As I fought with the controls, a memory surfaced. Dr. Zane Thomas presenting at an Ocean Guard symposium 3 years ago. Most of the audience dismissed him as a crackpot when he claimed megalodons could survive in deep ocean trenches. The scientific community ridiculed him, arguing that no large predator could withstand the pressure and lack of food in those depths. I wished I'd paid more attention instead of joining in the collective eye-rolling. Thomas had specifically mentioned behavioral patterns, how the creatures would likely be extremely territorial and aggressive toward intruders. He'd been right all along, and that knowledge might have saved my life. The megalodon was driving me ever deeper away from the surface and any hope of escape. I checked the depth gauge, 9,600 meters. The pressure outside would crush me instantly if the hull failed. I glanced at the navigation display and realized with growing horror that I was being herded. The megalodon wasn't just attacking randomly. It was systematically pushing me toward the terraformed trencher we'd discovered earlier. The massive mining machine filled my forward viewport now, its enormous cutting mechanisms grinding through the ancient seabed without pause. Lights along its industrial frame illuminated clouds of disturbed sediment. The trencher continued its mindless excavation, completely oblivious to the life and death struggle happening nearby. I was trapped between the approaching predator and the trencher with nowhere left to run. I moved my hands across the control panel, pulling up emergency protocols. There had to be something I could use. Gregory Kennedy, our safety officer, insisted on equipping the Poseidon with defensive measures despite budget cuts. At the time, I thought he was being overly cautious. Now, I thanked him for his paranoia. I found what I needed in the emergency systems menu: acoustic deterrent system. It was meant to repel sharks using frequencies that bothered their electroreceptors. Would it work on a creature extinct for millions of years? I had no other options left. I activated the system and immediately heard a low-pitched pulse emanating from the external speakers. The sound was barely perceptible to human ears, but supposedly unbearable to sharks. Come on, I muttered, watching the thermal display. The megalodon's heat signature hesitated in its approach. It stopped circling and seemed to drift backward slightly. Hope flared in my chest. I cranked the output to maximum, my finger jamming the control repeatedly until it couldn't go any higher. The pulse deepened, and I could feel the vibration through the floor of the submersible. For a moment, just a moment, I thought it might work. The massive predator had paused in its attack, seemingly confused by the unfamiliar stimulus. That hope died as the thermal signature suddenly surged forward, moving faster than I'd seen it move before. The megalodon hadn't been deterred. It had been enraged. The impact was devastating. The creature slammed into the side of the Poseidon with such force that I was thrown from my seat. Despite the harness, my head struck something hard, and stars exploded across my vision. I tasted blood in my mouth. Warning alarms blared throughout the cabin as I dragged myself back to the controls. The computer's voice had lost none of its calm, even as it delivered what might be my death sentence. Warning: structural integrity at 47%. Hull breach imminent. Emergency ascent recommended immediately. I stared at the status display in horror. 47%. One more hit like that and the Poseidon would collapse like an empty soda can. I made a desperate decision with no other options left. The submersible's structural integrity was failing. The megalodon was determined to tear the Poseidon apart, and every escape route had been cut off. The situation called for a move that went against all training and protocols. Only one way out, I muttered, fingers dancing across the control panel. I diverted all remaining power to the forward thrusters, pulling energy from life support and non-essential systems. The computer flashed warnings I ignored as the power gauge maxed out. The trencher's massive cutting mechanism loomed ahead, a wall of destruction that would tear through the Poseidon if we collided. That was exactly where I was heading. The control stick vibrated under my grip as I pushed it forward, feeling the submersible lurch with sudden acceleration. My body pressed back against the seat as the Poseidon shot toward what looked like certain death. Behind me, the thermal display showed the megalodon's massive heat signature in pursuit, closing the gap with powerful sweeps of its tail. "Come on, follow me, you prehistoric nightmare," I said, keeping my voice low and steady despite the hammering in my chest. The trencher filled the viewport as it advanced. Its grinding arrays rotated, sending up clouds of sediment as they cut into the seabed. I could see the individual teeth on the cutting wheels, each nearly as large as the Poseidon. The industrial lights on the trencher's frame illuminated the chaos. My hands remained surprisingly steady on the controls. Years of training had taught me to function under pressure, but this went beyond anything in the manual. The megalodon closed in now, just meters behind the Poseidon. On the rear camera feed, I could see its massive jaws open, ready for the kill. The ancient predator was so close I could make out the texture of its skin and the rows of serrated teeth that could snap the submersible in half. The distance calculator on my heads-up display ticked down rapidly. 100 meters to impact, 75 meters, 50 meters. Sweat rolled down my forehead and into my eyes, but I couldn't spare a hand to wipe it away. Every fiber of my being screamed to turn aside, to try another escape route, but I knew this was the only chance. The megalodon was too fast, too determined. It had been hunting in these depths for who knows how long, and I had invaded its territory. 30 m from impact. I took a deep breath and slammed my hand onto the emergency ballast release. a red button protected by a clear plastic cover that I'd never had to use outside of simulations. The effect was immediate and violent. The Poseidon expelled its ballast tanks with an explosive force, sending the submersible rocketing upward with such speed that my vision blurred. The sudden change in direction threw me against my harness with crushing force. The restraints bit into my shoulders and chest, forcing the air from my lungs in a painful gasp. Below me, through the floor viewport, I caught a glimpse of the Megalodon, the massive shark, locked in its attack trajectory and moving too fast to adjust its course, plunged directly into the trencher's primary cutting array. The water around the collision point instantly turned cloudy with blood and disturbed sediment, obscuring the details of the impact. But the violent shudder that traveled through the water told me all I needed to know about the force of the collision. The Poseidon shot upward, the hull straining from rapid decompression. Warning lights blinked as the computer struggled to manage the fast ascent. Normally, a submersible would rise slowly to equalize pressure. Now, I was free-falling in reverse. My ears popped painfully, and pressure built behind my eyes. Black spots danced in my vision as I fought to maintain consciousness. The depth gauge numbers spun backward at an alarming rate. I knew the decompression was dangerous, potentially fatal, but staying deeper meant certain death, either from the damaged submersible failing under pressure or from the Megalodon, if it had somehow survived the collision. The submersible shook violently as it tore through the water column. I reached for the ascent control, trying to moderate our rise, but my movements were sluggish, my coordination failing as my body struggled with the rapid pressure changes. The control panel swam before my eyes, the displays blurring into meaningless smears of color. I fought against the growing darkness at the edges of my vision, knowing that if I lost consciousness now, I might never wake up. The Poseidon needed guidance even in this emergency ascent. Without it, we might spin out of control or suffer a catastrophic hull failure. My fingers fumbled on the controls, trying to stabilize our rise, as the depth gauge continued its rapid countdown toward the surface. I managed to stabilize the Poseidon's rise at 5,000 meters, my hands shaking as I throttled back the remaining thrusters. The rapid ascent had left me dizzy, my ears still popping painfully as my body struggled to adjust to the changing pressure. The emergency lights cast an eerie red glow across the control panel, where at least a dozen warning indicators flashed in angry patterns. "Status report," I whispered to myself, trying to focus my scattered thoughts. I wiped blood from a cut on my forehead and ran a system diagnostic. The results made my stomach sink. Critical damage to the rear section. Hydraulic systems offline. Life support operating at 60% capacity, but the hull integrity indicator showed green. Barely, but green nonetheless. We hadn't breached, not yet. I exhaled slowly, realizing I'd been holding my breath. The Poseidon was in rough shape, but she was holding together. That was all I needed. My thoughts drifted momentarily to the Megalodon. Had my desperate gambit worked? Had the massive prehistoric predator slammed into the trencher as I'd planned? The image of those rows of teeth, each the size of my hand, remained burned into my mind. I shook my head, forcing myself back to the present. Speculation wouldn't get me to the surface. I reached for the emergency panel and flipped open the protective cover labeled Emergency Beacon. Haley Santiago had walked me through this system during training, insisting I memorize the activation sequence. "This isn't just any beacon, Michael," she told me. "I designed it to punch through 9,000 meters of ocean if necessary. If everything else fails, this won't." I punched in the 6-digit activation code and watched as the small screen lit up with confirmation. The beacon would now be broadcasting my position, depth, and basic status information to any Ocean Guard vessel within range. If the Vigilant was still waiting above, they'd know I was alive. With the beacon activated, I turned my attention to continuing the ascent. I needed to be methodical now. Too fast, and the pressure changes could kill me or stress the damaged hull beyond its limits. Too slow, and I might run out of oxygen before reaching the surface. I adjusted the ballast controls carefully, establishing a slow, controlled rise. The Poseidon groaned in protest, metal creaking like an old ship in a storm. Each sound made me wince, imagining microscopic cracks spreading through the hull. "Come on, girl," I murmured to the submersible. Just a little longer. The depth gauge showed 5,000 meters and slowly ticking down. At this rate, it would take hours to reach the surface, if we made it at all. I pulled up the oxygen management system on the touchscreen. The display showed current levels, consumption rate, and projected duration. I ran the calculations twice to be sure. At current consumption rates, I had about 7 hours of air. The ascent would take approximately 6 hours, if nothing else went wrong. That was cutting it close, too close. I took several slow, deliberate breaths, trying to lower my heart rate and oxygen consumption. Every molecule of air mattered now. With shaking hands, I checked the data drives that contained the recordings. The illegal trencher, the whale graveyard, and the living megalodon. Proof of all of it was stored on these drives. I couldn't lose this evidence. I secured them in the waterproof case strapped to my suit. If worst came to worst, maybe something would be salvageable. Even if I wasn't, hour by hour, the Poseidon crawled upward through the crushing darkness. I divided my attention between the depth gauge, the oxygen levels, and the hull integrity monitor. Everything else was secondary. 3 hours into the ascent, the primary lighting system failed completely, leaving me in the red emergency lighting. An hour after that, the internal temperature regulation system went offline, and the cabin began to grow uncomfortably cold. I was at approximately 2,000 meters when the radio crackled to life, startling me out of a daze. I'd been staring at the oxygen display, watching the numbers tick down, calculating and recalculating how much I had left. Poseidon 9, this is Vigilant. Do you copy? Michael, are you there? Captain Jessica's voice cut through the static, distorted but recognizable. I lunged for the radio, nearly pulling a muscle in my eagerness to respond. Vigilant, this is Poseidon 9, I said, my voice coming out as a hoarse croak. I cleared my throat and tried again. This is Poseidon 9. I copy you, Captain. Thank God, Jessica said, relief evident even through the static. We've been trying to reach you for hours. What's your status? Submersible, critically damaged, but ascending. Currently at, I checked the gauge, 1,900 meters. Hull integrity holding for now. Multiple systems failing. I estimate surface arrival in approximately 2 hours. Copy that. We're tracking your beacon. What happened down there? I took a deep breath. Mission accomplished, Captain. I documented the illegal mining operation. Terraform has a massive trencher down there, tearing up the seabed in protected waters. But I also encountered something impossible. There was a pause. Then James's voice came through. What do you mean by impossible, Michael? I almost laughed. How could I possibly explain what I'd seen in a way that wouldn't sound like oxygen deprivation hallucinations? I encountered a living megalodon, I said flatly. Approximately 20 meters long. It attacked the submersible multiple times. I have it all recorded. Everything's on the drives. Another pause. Longer this time. Did you say megalodon? James asked. As in the prehistoric shark that's been extinct for millions of years? Yes, and it's very much not extinct. I glanced at the depth gauge. 1,800 meters. Now I have proof. Multiple video angles, thermal imaging, it's all there. Michael, are you sure? James began. Prepare for emergency retrieval, I interrupted. The Poseidon is barely holding together. I'm going to need immediate extraction when I reach the surface. Understood. Captain Jessica's voice returned. Professional as always. Medical team is standing by. We'll be ready. The radio fell silent again, and I was left with the groaning of the damaged submersible and my own thoughts. I continued the agonizingly slow ascent, each passing hour increasing the strain on both the vessel and my body. My head throbbed and my vision occasionally blurred, probably from the hit I'd taken during the megalodon's attack, compounded by the rapid pressure changes during my emergency ascent. One by one, systems continued to fail. The internal lighting flickered and dimmed further. The environmental controls went completely offline, leaving the cabin increasingly cold and damp. The navigation system froze and had to be manually rebooted twice. I constantly rerouted power from non-essential systems to maintain life support, working through the procedures I drilled countless times, but never expected to need. With each passing minute, it became clearer that the Poseidon wouldn't be making another dive. I'd pushed the submersible beyond its limits. As I monitored the failing systems, my mind kept returning to the depths and what I'd found there. The whale graveyard, ancient bones scattered across the ocean floor, the massive industrial trencher carelessly destroying what had lain undisturbed for millennia. And the megalodon, a living fossil, somehow surviving in the darkness when the rest of its kind had vanished from the world. What else might be down there, I wondered, in the unexplored trenches of the world's oceans? What other impossible creatures might live beyond the reach of sunlight? And what damage were we doing, blindly reaching into the depths without understanding what we might disturb? The Poseidon continued its slow climb toward the surface, creaking and groaning under the strain. I checked the oxygen levels again, enough to reach the surface, but not much more. I'd make it, assuming nothing else went catastrophically wrong. I clutched the waterproof case containing the data drives. Whatever happened to me or the Poseidon, this evidence had to reach the surface. The world needed to see what I'd seen. They needed to know what lurked in the darkness below. I jolted as the Poseidon broke the surface, water pouring down the viewports. Sunlight hit my face through the cracked glass. The gauge read 0 meters. We'd made it. Oxygen levels blinked red at 17%. My fingers trembled as I reached for the emergency hatch release, but I couldn't get a grip. Dried blood covered my forearm, and my head throbbed from where the megalodon had hit me. Through the viewport, I spotted the Vigilant about 100 yards away, its engines roaring as it approached. Faces appeared at the railings, wide-eyed, pointing, shouting. They hadn't expected to see the Poseidon again, much less in one piece. I tried the radio once more. "This is Wong. I'm on the surface. Submersible critical. Michael." James's voice crackled through. "We see you. Hang tight. Extraction team's coming." I leaned back in the pilot seat and closed my eyes, letting exhaustion wash over me. The sound of motorized rafts grew louder, and someone banged on the hull. "Wong, you alive in there?" a voice called. Australian accent. Had to be Ryder or Boyd. "Yeah," I called back, my voice rasping. Hatch mechanism stuck. Metallic clanking and scraping sounds followed as the extraction team worked on the exterior latch. I gathered the waterproof case containing the data drives, clutching it to my chest. No matter what happened to me or the Poseidon now, this evidence had to survive. The hatch squealed open, letting in fresh air that made me dizzy with its sweetness after hours breathing recycled oxygen. Ryder's bearded face appeared in the opening. "Jesus, mate, what happened down there?" "You wouldn't believe me if I told you," I said. 2 crew members helped me up through the hatch. The bright daylight hurt my head. I squinted at the damaged exterior of the Poseidon. The hull scratched and dented, with a large gouge along one side, where hydraulic fluid had leaked. "Easy does it," Ryder said, helping guide me to the waiting raft. "Hull's ready to give up the ghost any minute." I stumbled onto the raft, legs unsteady after hours cramped in the pilot seat. One of the crew members wrapped a thermal blanket around my shoulders, while Ryder secured the submersible for towing. "The data," I said, offering the waterproof case to the nearest technician. "Get this to Dr. Stevenson now." The trip back to the Vigilant passed in a blur. As we approached the vessel, I saw more faces looking down from the deck. Captain Jessica with her hands gripping the railing, James next to her, looking pale, and Dr. Audrey Stevenson waiting with her tablet already in hand. Getting up the ladder took everything I had left. My muscles protested with each rung, the case tucked under one arm. Hands reached down to help pull me onto the deck when I neared the top. "Michael," Captain Jessica said, her weathered face lined with concern. "What happened to the Poseidon?" I couldn't answer yet. My legs gave out as soon as I hit the deck. 2 crew members caught me before I fell, easing me onto a bench along the gunwale. Dr. Stevenson knelt beside me, her red hair whipping in the wind. She took the waterproof case from my grip. "I'll get this analyzed immediately. Priority 1. I nodded, wincing at the pain in my head. A medic appeared, shining a light in my eyes. "Pupils equal and reactive," she said to no one in particular. "Any tingling in your extremities, joint pain, shortness of breath?" "Just tired," I said. "Hit my head during the ascent." "You need to be checked for decompression sickness," she insisted, wrapping a blood pressure cuff around my arm. That was an emergency ascent from deep water. I nodded, watching Ryder supervise the Poseidon being lifted aboard. The submersible looked worse in the light, a battered shell of technology. The crew secured it to the deck with heavy chains and tarps. "Michael," Captain Jessica said, pulling me back to the moment. "We need to know what happened." I took a deep breath and looked at the circle of faces that had gathered around me. Jessica, James, the medic, and several crew members I knew only by sight. I found Terraform's illegal mining operation. I started. A trencher bigger than anything I've ever seen tearing up the seabed. But that's not all. I paused, knowing how the next part would sound. I found a whale graveyard, ancient remains, perfectly preserved. And then I locked eyes with James. I found what was feeding there. "What was it?" James asked. "A megalodon. Living, hunting megalodon." James let out a short laugh, then stopped when he realized I wasn't joking. "That's impossible," he said. "They've been extinct for 2 million years." "I know," I finished. "I know what I saw, James. 20 meters long, prehistoric shark anatomy, hunting me through the trench." The crew exchanged glances. Captain Jessica's expression remained neutral, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. "Michael," she said gently, "the pressure at that depth." I recorded everything, I cut in. "Check the drives." As if on cue, Dr. Stevenson returned, her tablet in hand, face pale. "He's right," she said, turning the screen toward the group. "Look." The footage played, grainy and dark, but unmistakable. The massive silhouette circling the Poseidon's lights, the distinctive shape of the dorsal fin, the ancient teeth visible when it opened its mouth to attack. "That's," James trailed off, "a living Carcharocles megalodon, Dr. Stevenson confirmed, her voice tight with excitement. "The whale graveyard footage is equally significant. This changes everything we know about deep-sea ecosystems." Captain Jessica straightened her back. "All business now. Secure that footage. Multiple backups. We're returning to port immediately." She turned to her first officer. "Plot the fastest course back. I want us moving in 10 minutes." The crew scattered to their stations, leaving me with the medic, who continued her examination while I sat stunned on the bench. The reality of what I'd survived was only now truly hitting me. Later in the ship's medical bay, I lay on an examination table as the doctor finished cleaning the cut on my forehead. "You're lucky," she said. "No signs of decompression sickness. That emergency ascent could have killed you." "The megalodon would have definitely killed me," I pointed out. Dr. Stevenson entered with Ryder trailing behind her. She pulled up a chair next to my bed, tablet in hand. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Like I've been through a washing machine," I admitted. "But I'll live." "We've been reviewing your footage," Ryder said. "The damage to the Poseidon matches what would happen if something that size attacked it. The teeth marks on the hull." He shook his head. "I've never seen anything like it." "The whale graveyard is fascinating, Doctor," Stevenson said, swiping through images on her tablet. "Look at these bones. Some could be tens of thousands of years old. The cold would have preserved them well." She turned the tablet toward me, showing a still frame of the massive whale skull I'd documented. "It appears to be an ancient feeding ground," she continued. "Megalodon were known to prey on large whales. This could be where they brought their kills, perhaps following the same migratory routes for millions of years." "But how could they have survived?" I asked. "Everything we know says they went extinct." "Everything we know is incomplete, Doctor," Stevenson said. "Deep-sea trenches are some of the least explored places on Earth. The conditions remain stable over millions of years. Temperature, pressure, food sources. It's a perfect refuge for a species trying to escape changing surface conditions." Ryder picked up a piece of the Poseidon's hull plating he'd brought with him. "Look at this," he said, pointing to deep scratches in the titanium. "Those aren't from any normal impact. That's from teeth, big ones." I pushed myself up on my elbows, ignoring the dizziness that followed. The trencher is what drew it out, the vibrations. It was feeding on the whale carcasses that the trencher was disturbing. Dr. Stevenson nodded. "It makes sense. Sound travels efficiently underwater. If this is its territory, any disturbance would attract its attention." "And I was just another disturbance," I said. The ship's intercom crackled. "Dr. Stevenson, to the lab, please. We've completed the initial data download." She stood. "Rest. We'll talk more later." After they left, I lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The medical bay was quiet, except for the hum of the ship's engines and the distant sound of waves against the hull. My mind kept replaying the image of the megalodon appearing in my lights, ancient and terrifying. The next few days passed in a blur. I spent most of my time sleeping, my body recovering from the physical and mental stress. When I wasn't sleeping, I was working with Dr. Stevenson and her team, going through the footage frame by frame, cataloging every detail of the trencher, the whale graveyard, and the megalodon. In the ship's office, I started my report for Zoe and the other Ocean Guard executives. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I struggled to find the right words to describe what I'd seen. How do you explain that a monster from humanity's nightmares still exists? How do you convey the fear of being hunted by something that predates human civilization? The evidence would speak for itself, but the implications were staggering. Not just for science, but for Ocean Guard's mission. We'd gone looking for illegal mining and found something that would change our understanding of ocean ecosystems forever. I saved the draft and closed the laptop. Through the porthole, I could see the distant lights of the coast. We were almost home, carrying evidence that would soon shake the foundations of marine biology and international law. But for now, I was simply grateful to be alive, to feel the gentle roll of the ship beneath me rather than the crushing pressure of the deep. I sat across from Miguel Tran in his office at Ocean Guard headquarters, watching as he leaned toward the large screen on the wall. 2 days had passed since my near-death experience in the Mariana Trench, but my body still felt the effects, the ache in my head, the stiffness in my joints from the pressure changes, and the cut on my forehead now covered with a small bandage. The bruises on my arms had darkened to purple. "Play it from the beginning," Tran said, his eyes never leaving the screen. I tapped the tablet in front of me and the footage started. The evidence I'd risked my life to collect filled the wall-sized display. The massive industrial trencher carving through protected seabed, destroying an ecosystem that had remained untouched for millions of years. Zoe Bradley stood behind Tran, arms crossed, watching with an intensity that matched her boss's. Her usual crisp suit and perfect posture gave away nothing of what she was thinking, but I caught the slight curl at the corner of her mouth. Satisfaction at seeing our competitor's illegal operation exposed in such undeniable detail. "Pause there," Tran said as the footage displayed the destruction. "You can see how they've violated at least 7 international protections." He shook his head. "How long has this operation been active?" "Based on the extent of the excavation, at least 3 months," I said. "Maybe longer." He nodded and motioned for me to continue the playback. The footage advanced to the whale graveyard. Ancient bones scattered across the seabed, some partially buried in sediment laid down over centuries, others more recent. The camera panned across massive skulls and vertebrae, some larger than the Poseidon itself. "This site is valuable," I said. "Those remains could reveal details about whale evolution, migration, and possibly extinct species we haven't discovered." Tran leaned forward in his chair. "And terraform just plowed right through it like it was nothing." I agreed. Zoe stepped closer to the screen. "The International Seabed Authority will have a field day with this. Terraform's entire deep water operation could be shut down pending review." I continued the footage. Both of them knew what was coming next. They'd been briefed, but seeing it was different than hearing about it. The thermal signature appeared on screen. At first, just a blur of heat moving at the edge of the Poseidon's detection range. Then it grew larger, more defined. "Here it comes," I said quietly. The external lights of the submersible illuminated the water, and there it was, a living megalodon, 20 meters of prehistoric apex predator, moving with purpose and intelligence. Its massive jaw opened, rows of teeth visible as it approached the camera. Tran's eyes widened. He sat back in his chair, his usual composed demeanor cracking just enough to show genuine awe. I glanced at Zoe. Her triumph over the terraform evidence had vanished, replaced by open shock. Her arms had uncrossed, one hand now resting on the back of Tran's chair for support. "My God," she whispered. The footage continued, showing the chase, the attacks on the Poseidon, and finally my desperate maneuver to escape. When it ended, the room fell silent. Tran touched a control on his desk, and the lights in the office brightened. "This changes everything," he said, turning to me. The illegal mining evidence alone could shut down Terraform's operations in protected waters. But this, he pointed to the screen where the image of the megalodon was frozen. This is more than I expected when I authorized this mission. What happens now? I asked, setting the tablet down. Tran stood up and walked to the windows, overlooking the San Francisco Bay. We move forward carefully. The mining evidence goes to the International Seabed Authority immediately. Our legal team is preparing the case. He turned to me. As for the megalodon, that requires a more measured approach. Why? I asked. Isn't it all part of the same case? Zoe stepped forward. Think of the implications, Michael. A living prehistoric species thought extinct for over 2 million years. Scientists will want access. The government will get involved. So will the military and treasure hunters, Tran said. Fortune seekers, the media would swarm. I hadn't considered that angle. So we keep it quiet? Not quiet, Tran said. Controlled. We bring in trusted experts first. Build a proper scientific response before going public. He paused. Starting with Dr. Zane Thomas. That surprised me. Thomas? I thought he was pushed out. He was. Zoe finished for me. His theories about megafauna survival in deep-sea trenches were dismissed as fringe science. She looked at the screen again. But it seems he was right all along. I've already reached out to him, Tran said. He's agreed to join us as a consultant, effective immediately. I thought about the whale graveyard and the massive predator that had nearly killed me. That trench was an ancient ecosystem. The whales have been dying there for who knows how long. And the megalodon, it must have been feeding there for generations, until Terraform's trencher disturbed it. Exactly, Zoe said. I ran a hand through my hair, feeling the spot where I'd hit my head during the escape. We went down there thinking we were just going to catch a company breaking environmental laws. But what we found was much bigger. We disturbed something ancient and terrifying that should have been left alone. Tran returned to his desk. Perhaps. But what's done is done. Now we need to handle this responsibly. Zoe pulled out her tablet and started making notes. I'll coordinate with legal about the ISA presentation. We'll need expert testimony. Yours primarily, Michael. She looked up at me. Are you ready for that? Yes, I said, though my stomach tightened at the thought of reliving the experience in front of a panel of judges. Tran and Zoe continued mapping out strategy, legal filings, scientific papers, carefully timed press releases. They discussed which government agencies needed to be informed first, how to approach the scientific community, ways to protect the site from unauthorized exploration. As they talked, my mind drifted back to those moments in the trench. The darkness, the pressure, the feeling of being hunted by something that shouldn't exist. And I found myself wondering if the megalodon survived 2 million years in hiding. What else might be down there? What other prehistoric survivors might be lurking in the unexplored darkness of the world's oceans? The thought made me shiver. Michael, Tran's voice pulled me back to the present. Sorry, I said. I was just thinking. I was saying that your actions during this encounter were impressive, he said. Your quick thinking saved your life and secured evidence that will change our understanding of marine biology. Not many would have stayed calm when faced with a living megalodon, or had the guts to use a multi-million-dollar submersible as bait, Zoe added with what almost looked like respect in her eyes. Thank you, I said, not sure what else to add. I hadn't felt brave down there, just desperate to survive. We'll reconvene tomorrow with Dr. Thomas, Tran said, standing to signal the meeting's end. Get some rest, Michael. The hard part is just beginning. I tugged at my dress shirt collar as I faced the International Seabed Authority panel. 7 judges sat on a curved dais, their expressions ranging from mild interest to skepticism. The hearing room felt more intimidating than I expected, with polished wood and brass fixtures surrounding me. Mr. Wong, said the central judge, a woman with silver-streaked hair pulled into a tight bun. Please continue your testimony regarding what you witnessed in the Mariana Trench. I cleared my throat and gestured toward the large display screen to my right. As outlined in my written statement, I was conducting a standard monitoring mission when I discovered this. The footage began playing, showing the massive Terraform trencher carving through the protected seabed. This industrial trencher was operating at approximately 9,000 meters depth, well within the protected zone established by the 2027 Deep Ocean Conservation Act. The judges leaned forward almost in unison. One of them, an older man with bushy eyebrows, removed his glasses as if they were somehow interfering with what he was seeing. The trencher was extracting rare earth minerals by literally scraping away the seabed. I continued, watching their reactions carefully. You can see from the footage that the operation has created a gouge nearly 800 meters long and 30 meters wide. The head judge raised her hand to pause the presentation. And you're certain this location is within the protected boundaries? Yes, Madam Chairperson. The GPS coordinates are embedded in the recording metadata. Our technical team has prepared a separate analysis confirming the exact location. I noticed the Terraform legal team shifting in their seats. There were 5 of them, 3 lawyers and 2 technical consultants, all in dark suits that made them look uniform. The footage continued, showing the scattered whale bones across the seabed. Several judges audibly gasped. These remains represent a significant whale fall site, possibly dating back thousands of years, I explained. The ecological and scientific value is incalculable. I glanced toward my own team. Zoe Bradley sat with perfect posture, her face revealing nothing. Next to her, our legal counsel nodded slightly, encouraging me to continue. As the recording approached the Megalodon section, I paused it. The remainder of this footage contains additional evidence, but it's separate from the mining violation claims. With the court's permission, we'd like to reserve that for a later discussion. The head judge nodded, and I went back to my seat. The Terraform lead counsel stood up, a tall man with slicked back hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mr. Wong's testimony contains several concerning elements, he began, pacing slowly before the judges. First, we question the authenticity of this footage. The submersible in question returned severely damaged, and the recording equipment was subjected to extreme pressures and impacts that would compromise data integrity. I clenched my jaw, but remained silent as he continued. Second, Mr. Wong himself suffered a head injury during this alleged encounter, calling into question his ability to accurately recall and interpret events. The lawyer gestured toward the bandage still visible on my forehead. We request that the court dismiss this highly questionable evidence. The head judge turned toward our side. Does Ocean Guard wish to respond? Our technical director, Liam Chen, approached the podium. I'd only met him twice before, but his reputation within the organization was stellar. Madam Chairperson, we anticipated these claims, Liam said calmly. Therefore, we conducted comprehensive authenticity verification on all footage. The Poseidon submersible contains multiple redundant recording systems specifically designed to withstand extreme conditions. He tapped his tablet, and new information appeared. We've prepared a technical analysis of the footage, including metadata, timestamp verification, and sensor cross-referencing that proves these recordings were not tampered with. The submersible's navigation logs match the recorded coordinates. For the next 20 minutes, Liam methodically dismantled every technical objection the Terraform team raised. With each point, the Terraform lawyers looked increasingly agitated. When Liam finished, the room fell silent. The judges conferred quietly among themselves before the head judge spoke. The panel finds the evidence presented by Ocean Guard to be admissible and compelling. This appears to be a clear violation of international protections for the Mariana Trench Marine Reserve. She turned her attention to the Terraform representatives. Does Terraform wish to present any substantive defense regarding the actual mining operation shown in this footage? Their lead counsel stood again, his earlier confidence visibly diminished. We request a recess to consult with our technical team before responding. Denied, the head judge said firmly. Your team has had ample time to prepare. The panel will now deliberate. The next 40 minutes passed in tense silence. I checked my watch repeatedly, trying not to make eye contact with the Terraform team sitting across the aisle. Zoe leaned over once to whisper, "Well done," before returning to her stoic observation of the room. When the judges returned, their decision was decisive. The head judge cleared her throat before speaking. The International Seabed Authority finds Terraform Corporation in clear violation of the Deep Ocean Conservation Act and the International Seabed Resource Management Treaty. The panel hereby levies a fine of $850 million for environmental damages and immediate suspension of all Terraform deep-sea operations, pending a comprehensive investigation of their activities worldwide. Relief washed through me. The Terraform team sat in stunned silence. Furthermore, the judge continued, Terraform will fund an independent assessment of damage to the affected ecosystem and contribute to rehabilitation efforts as determined by ISA scientific advisors. She brought down her gavel with finality. This hearing is adjourned. The room erupted into motion. Reporters rushing out to file stories, lawyers gathering papers, and officials exchanging handshakes. I stood slowly, suddenly aware of how tense my body had been throughout the proceedings. Zoe approached, allowing herself a small smile. That went even better than expected. Tran will be pleased. What happens now? I asked. Now we deal with the bigger question, she replied, nodding toward the door where a slender man with wire-rimmed glasses stood waiting. Your megalodon. Dr. Zane Thomas looked exactly as I remembered him from old lecture videos. Slightly stooped posture, perpetually distracted expression, and clothes that seemed one size too large for his frame. His eyes lit up when he spotted me, and he hurried over with surprising energy for a man his age. Mr. Wong, he said, extending his hand eagerly. I've been waiting quite impatiently to meet you. His handshake was firmer than I expected. Dr. Thomas, I wasn't sure when you'd arrive. I've been here all along, sitting in the back. He gestured vaguely behind him. Fascinating proceedings, though rather predictable once your technical chap began his analysis. But that's not why I'm here. His eyes gleamed with barely contained excitement. You found it. After all these years, you actually found it. I glanced at Zoe, who nodded slightly and stepped away to give us some privacy. Your research was spot on, I told him. Everything you predicted about deep trench megafauna, the behavioral patterns, the territorial response, even the attraction to low-frequency vibrations. Zane placed a hand on my shoulder. You've done what I couldn't. 30 years I spent being mocked by colleagues, having funding pulled, watching my theories dismissed as fantasy. His voice wavered slightly. Thank you for vindicating my life's work. I felt uncomfortable with his gratitude. I just happened to be there with a camera. No false modesty, please, he admonished gently. Tran told me about your escape strategy. Quick thinking under pressure, the mark of an excellent field researcher. Before I could respond, Dr. Audrey Stevenson approached us, tablet in hand. Unlike Zane's rumpled appearance, Audrey looked impeccable, as always, in her tailored pantsuit, her auburn hair pulled back in a perfect knot. The conference room is ready, she said briskly. We should review the footage before tomorrow's scientific panel. We followed her to a smaller room down the hall, where the three of us gathered around a large display. The footage began playing, this time showing the thermal signature that had first alerted me to the megalodon's presence. Check out this heat signature, Audrey said, pausing the frame. It's much higher than what we usually see in big marine predators. This could change everything. Zane nodded eagerly. Suggests specialized adaptation to the pressure and temperature extremes. Look at the movement pattern here. He traced the creature's path with his finger. Classic apex predator behavior. Territorial circling followed by direct approach. As they analyzed the footage frame by frame, I found myself reliving the terror of that encounter. The massive jaws, the impact against the hull, the sound of metal groaning under pressure. I must have gone quiet because Audrey suddenly turned to me. Are you all right, Michael? I nodded, just remembering how it felt to be hunted by something that big. Zane looked up from the screen. Of course, forgive our academic detachment. You nearly died bringing this evidence back. A living Carcharocles megalodon, adapted to extreme depth. It changes what we know about evolution and species survival, Audrey said, returning to her tablet. Not to mention raising questions about what else might be down there. Zane added, if one prehistoric species survived, others might have as well. The deep trenches could be refuges for numerous species we've presumed extinct. We spent hours analyzing the footage with Zane and Audrey occasionally engaging in friendly but intense debates about the implications. Their scientific enthusiasm contrasted sharply with my visceral memory of fear. The scientific community is already divided, Audrey explained as she pulled up several emails on her tablet. Half my colleagues are demanding immediate research expeditions to document and study the megalodon in its natural habitat. And the other half? I asked. They're calling for the area to be designated as a special protection zone with no human interference whatsoever, Zane replied. Both sides have valid arguments. Audrey frowned slightly. Woods Hole is already assembling a research team. The Scripps Institute is drafting a proposal for a deep water observation platform. The Chinese Oceanographic Institute has requested the exact coordinates. This is happening too fast, I said, suddenly concerned. We don't understand what we're dealing with yet. That's precisely why research is essential, Audrey countered. Without proper scientific study, we can't develop appropriate conservation protocols. Zane leaned back in his chair, studying me. You seem torn, Michael. I want to understand this creature, but I saw what happened when we disturbed its territory. Terraform has already damaged its habitat. I pointed to the whale graveyard footage. This was a healthy ecosystem until we arrived. The scientist's dilemma, Zane said. To study is to disturb, yet without study, we cannot protect. Our discussion continued until late evening, when a message from Miguel Tran requested my presence in his office. I excused myself, leaving Zane and Audrey still deep in debate. Tran's office was dimly lit when I entered, with the city lights visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind his desk. He motioned for me to sit. Excellent work at the hearing today, he said. The ISA ruling exceeded our expectations. Thank you. The technical team deserves most of the credit. Tran waved this away. The evidence wouldn't exist without your actions in the field. He studied me for a moment. You've heard about the scientific response to the megalodon footage. Audrey and Zane briefed me. Everyone wants a piece of it. Indeed. Tran leaned forward, resting his elbows on his desk. Which brings me to why I called you here. Ocean Guard will be leading a follow-up research mission to the site. I want you to head it. The offer caught me off guard. Me? You've already been there. You've encountered the creature and survived. No one is better qualified. He slid a folder across the desk. A new submersible is being prepared, the Poseidon 10. Enhanced structural reinforcement, improved sensor array, and defensive countermeasures, specifically designed with the megalodon in mind. I stared at the folder without opening it. The idea of returning to those depths sent a cold feeling through my chest. You don't need to decide immediately, Tran said, reading my hesitation. Take some time. Consider what this discovery means both scientifically and personally. The mission won't launch for at least 3 months. I nodded, picking up the folder. And if I decide not to go, then we'll find someone else, Tran replied evenly. But they won't have your experience or insight. Think about it, Michael. This is the opportunity of a lifetime. I left his office with the folder tucked under my arm, my mind crowded with conflicting thoughts. The prospect of returning to the depths that had nearly claimed my life filled me with dread. Yet the scientist in me burned with questions only another expedition could answer. In my hotel room that night, I laid the folder on the desk without opening it. Through the window, I could see the harbor lights reflecting on the water's surface, deceptively calm and inviting. Somewhere far below, beyond human sight, ancient creatures continued their existence as they had for millions of years. Whether they would remain undisturbed or become the next frontier of human exploration partly depended on my decision.